I never believed in ghosts until the night I heard my dead daughter singing in her empty bedroom. What happened next didn't just change my life, it shattered everything I thought I knew about love, loss, and what waits for us on the other side. This is my story, and I'm telling it because someone out there needs to hear it. Someone out there needs to know that death isn't always the end, and that sometimes, the ones we've lost find ways to reach back through the darkness to remind us that love is stronger than anything, even the grave itself. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and 6 months ago, I would have laughed if you'd told me I'd be sharing a paranormal story. I was a high school English teacher in Portland, Oregon, practical, rational, someone who believed in lesson plans and grammar rules, not spirits and supernatural phenomena. My husband David was a software engineer, equally grounded in logic and code. We were the kind of people who rolled our eyes at ghost stories, who changed the channel when paranormal shows came on television. We lived in a world of facts, of things we could see and touch and prove. But grief has a way of changing everything you thought you knew about the world. Our daughter Emma died 3 weeks before her 8th birthday. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March, one of those cruel, beautiful spring days when the cherry blossoms were just beginning to bloom. She was riding her bike in front of our house on Maple Street, a quiet suburban road where children had played safely for decades. The driver who hit her was texting. He didn't even see her until it was too late. One moment our little girl was laughing, her brown curls flying behind her as she pedaled faster, calling out to me to watch her do a trick. The next moment, there was the screech of brakes, a sound I still hear in my nightmares, and then silence, the kind of silence that swallows the entire world whole. Emma died instantly. That's what the doctors told us, as if it was supposed to be a comfort. She didn't suffer, they said. But we did. Oh God, we suffered. The months that followed were a blur of unbearable pain. David threw himself into work, staying at the office until midnight, sometimes sleeping on the couch in the break room. He couldn't bear to be in the house, couldn't bear to walk past Emma's room with its purple walls and the glow-in-the-dark stars we'd stuck to the ceiling together. I understood. I felt the same suffocating weight every time I came home, but I couldn't leave. Leaving felt like abandoning her somehow, like admitting she was really gone. I moved through those days like a ghost myself, teaching my classes on autopilot, barely eating, barely sleeping. My sister Rachel called every day, begging me to see a therapist, to take medication, to do something other than sit in Emma's room for hours, holding her stuffed rabbit and breathing in the fading scent of her strawberry shampoo. But I couldn't. That room was all I had left of her. It was September when things started to change. The leaves were turning gold and crimson, and I was dreading Emma's birthday, or rather, the day that should have been her birthday. She would have turned 8. We should have been planning a party, buying presents, baking her favorite chocolate cake with pink frosting. Instead, David and I barely spoke anymore. We existed in the same house like two planets in separate orbits, close enough to see each other but impossibly far apart. The first incident happened on a Thursday night. David was working late again, and I was alone in the house, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I had no intention of drinking. The house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floors settling. I was staring at nothing, lost in that fog of grief that had become my constant companion, when I heard it. Music. Soft at first, so soft I thought I was imagining it. But then it grew clearer, a child's music box, playing that familiar tinkling melody. My blood ran cold because I knew that tune. It was from the music box David had given Emma for her 7th birthday, a delicate porcelain box with a tiny ballerina that spun when you opened the lid. Emma had loved it, winding it up every night before bed, watching the ballerina twirl as the music played. The music box was in Emma's room. I hadn't touched it since she died. I hadn't touched anything in her room except to sit in her small chair and hold her things. The music box sat on her dresser, its lid closed, its mechanism unwound. My hands were shaking as I stood up from the table. The logical part of my brain was scrambling for explanations. Maybe a window was open and the wind had somehow triggered it, maybe the house had shifted and knocked it over, maybe I was finally losing my mind and hallucinating the whole thing. But my heart knew. Somehow, my heart knew this was different. I walked slowly toward Emma's room, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. The music continued, that sweet, haunting melody that Emma had loved so much. When I reached her doorway, I stopped, my hand on the frame, afraid to look inside. The music box was playing. The lid was open, and the tiny ballerina was spinning in perfect circles, catching the moonlight that streamed through the window. But there was no one there. No wind, no disturbance, nothing that could explain it. The room was exactly as I'd left it, her bed neatly made with the purple comforter, her books stacked on the shelf, her drawings still taped to the wall. I stood there frozen, watching the ballerina spin, and then, as suddenly as it had started, the music stopped. The ballerina came to rest, and the room fell silent again. I should have been terrified. Every horror movie I'd ever seen, every scary story I'd ever read, told me I should be running in the opposite direction. But I wasn't scared. I was crying, tears streaming down my face, because for the first time in 6 months, I felt something other than crushing despair. I felt hope. Emma, I whispered into the darkness. Baby, is that you? There was no answer. Just the quiet hum of the house and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I walked into the room and sat down on her bed, picking up the music box with trembling hands. The mechanism was unwound, just as I'd thought. It shouldn't have been able to play. It couldn't have played. But it had. I wound it up manually, and the music started again, the ballerina spinning obediently. It sounded exactly the same, but somehow different, emptier, more mechanical. When Emma's music box had played earlier, there had been something else, some quality I couldn't name. Warmth, maybe. Presence. I stayed in that room all night, waiting, hoping, praying for something else to happen. But nothing did. As dawn broke and pale light filled the room, I finally fell asleep on Emma's bed, clutching her rabbit, the music box silent on the dresser beside me. When David came home that morning and found me there, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me with such profound sadness that I couldn't bring myself to tell him what had happened. He already thought I was losing myself to grief. If I told him I believed Emma's ghost had played her music box, he'd insist on doctors and medication and interventions. So I said nothing, and we continued our separate orbits of pain. But I knew what I'd heard. And I knew, somehow, that it was just the beginning. The second incident happened 3 days later. I was in the kitchen making dinner, or pretending to make dinner, really just going through the motions of chopping vegetables I probably wouldn't eat, when I heard footsteps above me. Small footsteps, like a child running across the floor. They came from Emma's room, directly overhead. The knife clattered from my hand into the sink. I stood perfectly still, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and listened. The footsteps ran from one side of the room to the other, then back again, the way Emma used to run when she was playing, when she was happy and full of energy and alive. This time I didn't hesitate. I ran upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, and burst into Emma's room. It was empty. Of course it was empty. But the air felt different, warmer somehow, and there was a scent, faint but unmistakable. Strawberry shampoo. Emma, I said, my voice stronger now. Emma, if you're here, please. Please let me know. I miss you so much, baby. I miss you every second of every day. The room remained still, but I felt something. I can't explain it better than that. I felt something shift in the air, some gentle presence that made the hair on my arms stand up, not with fear but with something like recognition. Like when you walk into a room and sense someone you love is there before you even see them. I sank down onto the floor, my back against her bed, and I talked to her. I told her about my day, about the students in my class, about how her father was struggling, about how much we loved her and always would. I told her about the cherry blossoms that had bloomed again in spring, how I couldn't look at them without thinking of that terrible day, but how I'd picked one and pressed it in a book for her. I talked until my voice was hoarse, until the sun had set completely and the room was dark except for the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. And then I heard it. A whisper, so soft it might have been the wind, might have been my imagination, might have been nothing at all. Mommy. I stopped breathing. Every muscle in my body locked, and for a moment I thought my heart might actually stop. Because that was Emma's voice. I knew my daughter's voice the way I knew my own heartbeat, and that was her. I'm here, baby, I whispered back, tears flooding my eyes. I'm right here. But there was nothing more. The presence I'd felt seemed to fade, like smoke dissipating, and I was alone again in the darkness.